open world games, man. Everyone's making it. Everyone's making a version of open world games, their own type. And it's like not every idea is built for open world. I mean, I get where it comes from. You know, open world is the definitive way of realizing a fantasy. Because you think about it, like video games are the definitive way of experiencing a fantasy, right? Because in movies, all you can do is experience it vicariously. You can't really make the decisions for the characters. You have to watch them make it, right? Maybe you can agree with their decision and go along with it, but you're not the one driving those decisions. That's why video games are like the way to experience a fantasy, right? And if imposing control is the bar I'm using here to experience fantasy, then that means open world would make sense to be the highest form of, experiencing the fantasy. I don't know how many times I'm going to say that. God dang. Maybe I should start scripting. That's why the whole draw of Sonic Frontiers was there, right? Because you wanted to play as Sonic, but not in the structured way. You wanted to be Sonic, right? You wanted to zoom around in the world, go wherever you want, make your own choices. And we got that. And that was why it was praised, right? But while you do get like a sense of freedom in experiencing the game the way you want to, the stories of these games suffer so much. Because if you are experiencing the game in the full freedom that you want to have, you should also have freedom in experiencing the story the way you want to. But then there's a lot of open world games that do the whole thing where you have an open world sandbox experience, but then for the missions you kind of have to follow the set way. Even Ghost of Tsushima, the game I freaking glazed, made a whole video about glazing it, right? Even that game had that issue where they would want you to play in a certain way, but then they also had the open world. So it kind of was juggling these two different things that don't really mesh well. But because Ghost of Tsushima had that samurai gimmick to it, we were able to accept it more. If we had more games that were based in that era, it would be harder to accept it. You'd be like, well, maybe this didn't really have to be an open world game. I'm not saying Ghost is bad, okay? I love it. I'm excited for the next one too, despite the female lead, right? But a lot of times the stories they deliver while delivering an open world experience is very linear. There's no freedom to it. And even when they do have that openness to the story, it comes with so many drawbacks. Like let's look at Breath of the Wild, right? In Breath of the Wild, you have the 4 main divine beasts. These are what I would equate to the classic dungeons of Zelda, right? You have the shrines that are basically just 2-minute puzzles to solve, but then you have the 4 divine beasts that are those long dungeons that you had to solve in the game, right? And so these divine beasts, they're called beasts because they take after an animal. So there's one that looks like an elephant, one looks like a camel, one's a bird, and the other is a salamander, I think. But in Breath of the Wild, they have this plot line where the divine beasts are terrorizing this corner of the world. In one of the areas, it's always raining. There's no sun for the past 100 years because somehow these divine beasts, these weapons of mass destruction got corrupted, right? Now we have to save them. It's raining for the past 100 years. We have to bring sunlight to that area. But when you do clear that area, you defeat the boss, and now after 100 years, there's no more rain. And then you go to the next area. They're not influenced by that area being freed at all. They don't even mention it. I was expecting, maybe they'd be like, oh, Link, I see you killed the elephant there. Mind sharing that elephant skin with us? We can make some pelt out of that. None of that. They were just like, we got some problems. You want to help us out? Not even acknowledging this place has been under rain for the past 100 years. Not even a gleam of sunlight. And now finally, the rain stopped and it's sunny. They're not even mentioning that. It's not like a small portion of the map. It's a pretty significant portion. There's a whole kingdom there that they interact with, but somehow they miss the fact that there's sunlight now after 100 years. And that's what I mean, right? These stories, they can't let these separate segments interact with each other because they don't really know how you progress through the story, what path you pick first, right? They're just letting you decide where to go. And that's fun in its own way. You get a whole new type of experience, a sandbox experience. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I get the whole draw of having this ledge you can't cross and then you chop a tree so you make it as a bridge and then you can cross. I get that. These moments of discovery in the game that really hook you into the game. You're like, wow, I did that shit. It makes you feel smart for figuring that out, right? Even though it's a pretty basic thing now that you look at it, right? It gives you that freedom to do that, that freedom to figure that out on your own and solve it and make you feel like a brainiac, like Megamind or some shit. You know what I mean? I think the main pain point for these non-linear games is the fact that these stories usually have a cinematic experience to them, right? These stories are meant to be delivered the same way Uncharted is meant to be delivered. But then they have this open world in them that kind of makes no sense to have. You end up getting lost in the open world, and by the time you're at the next story mission, you've forgotten what happened before. You kind of need a refresher. It's kind of working against itself, the story and the open world. And that's for the games that actually have a good story. Usually Usually these open world stories are really bad. I mean, it could also be because of the way we're experiencing it. You know, it's kind of a neutered version of their storytelling. But it feels like the game was developed first, and then they were like, oh, stories. I think people really are into that, you know, stories and whatnot. Maybe let's include one, you know, maybe let's, what do you got? What do you got? You got something to say? Any story you've been thinking about writing? Yeah, let's put that in. That's how it feels like these stories are. There's not really a direction for them. They're just an afterthought. I'm not saying all games are like that. All non-linear games are like that. You know, Elden Ring did a really good job of blending that non-linear fashion of making games into their storytelling. In Elden Ring, you're just this random character who spawned into this world. You're being told, oh, go be the Elden Lord. But you don't really know what's going on, right? You're just kind of roaming around, seeing what looks interesting to you and go there. But that's the whole point of Elden Ring's story. It's that your experience of the game is the story. When you start a playthrough, whatever you do, maybe you choose to skip Radahn, maybe you don't even notice he's there. You know, you just go straight to Renala and then you join the family. I forgot his name, but you go there and then you go straight to the capital, right? That would be your story for that playthrough. The next playthrough, you're like, oh wait, Radahn's there. Now that's the story for that playthrough. They make it so where you digest it the way you want to. It's like they use their disadvantage of having an open world and story not being able to mesh together to their advantage. They created a story that didn't need you to experience it as a cinematic experience. You could experience it as gameplay. The narrative tool it's using is the gameplay. You know, that's why most of their stories are set in a world where these great mythological figures are all decaying and they're on their last legs. They're past their prime. And you have to be the one to discover them. You have to decipher them. You have to put them together. And you do that by going to Vati Vidya. Right? No one is out here doing it themselves. Come on. I don't know how the hell that guy knows all this shit, right? What does he know that we don't? How does he figure it out? Seriously. What does he do? Because I look at the item and I'm like, oh, that's a cool story. I'll try to remember that. By the time I find the next item, I don't even know what the hell happened. You know, I've died 5 times. I fell off cliffs. How does this guy keep track of all of this? We got to figure out his Notion setting, you know, because there's no way he's not taking notes as he's playing the game. That's just, I can't believe that. And that's what I mean, right? By the time I got to the next item, which would translate to the next story point for FromSoft games, right? I had already forgotten the previous point. You know, I was like, yeah, this is cool. Maybe I'll remember it for the next one. And you know, that never happens, right? Then you look at games like GTA 5 or Red Dead 2, right? They have an amazing open world, but their stories are so linear that it kind of, you know, when you're going into an open world game, you're in a certain mood. You know, you want to experience the game in a certain way. You want to be able to do whatever you want to do. But then you have this rigid storyline that kind of funnels you into one direction. And you're like, well, I'm not in that mood. I don't want that right now, man. Let me do what I want to do. They don't really use that freedom you have in that open world game to their advantage because they want to tell the cinematic story. That's why I personally prefer linear progression games, but I find myself coming back to open world games way more than linear games. I played Sekiro and I freaking love the combat. That's probably my favorite combat from all the Souls games. I haven't played it ever since I beat it. But Elden Ring, I keep coming back to that, trying new builds, trying different things. Even Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 3, Liza P. They all rhymed. But yeah, I keep coming back to these games way more than the linear games because there's more to do. So it has that replayability. But I like the idea of being gatekept from certain features until a certain story point. Kind of makes that part of the story really special and it makes it feel like the story has completely changed into something new. Think about when you unlock the Mortal Blade in Sekiro. Now you're like, you know, and it means something in story, right? These bosses aren't just regular. You can't just kill them with your regular blade. You need the Mortal Blade. You need to kill the centipede in them. This is a different act of the story. But even in like games like Sparking Zero, I haven't played it yet, but I hope there's a system where you have to unlock the characters for local play. You can't just have all the characters unlocked before you finish the story for local couch co-op or even multiplayer. You have to unlock these characters. That's what I mean. It feels like you're progressing in the game. You know, I don't know. When I think back to it, I never had a moment in a non-linear game where I have that one defining moment, that one moment that I could be like, oh shit, yeah, every time someone brings that game up, I'd be like, yeah, I remember that scene. But I've had a lot of that in linear games. The difference is though, when I finish linear games, I don't have that post-game blues. That shit when you're all sad, you can't get out of bed because you finished this masterpiece of a game. I had that after playing Elden Ring and Breath of the Wild. I just couldn't deal with life. I was like, I just went through heartbreak here, okay? And I think the reason why I had that post-game blues with these open world games and not the linear games is because in linear games, you don't build your own personal experiences, right? You experience it vicariously, like I said before with the movies thing, right? It's kind of similar to movies, linear games. You don't have that autonomy of creating your own personal experiences with the game. But with games like Elden Ring or Breath of the Wild, you can do whatever you want to do. So you create these personal experiences that is only unique to you. And it kind of builds that relationship with the game where you kind of get attached to it. Like I remember in Breath of the Wild, I would climb the tallest snowy mountain to see where the next shrine is. And then I would use the Hylian shield to surf all the way down to that shrine. Because it was just so much more fun than just teleporting to the closest shrine. You hear the music as well when you're up there. And sometimes maybe you'll find a dragon out of nowhere. And you're like, whoa, what the hell is that? Let me go chase after that. Whoa, what the hell? I can shoot the horn? Oh my god, I got a piece of the horn. What the hell does this do? There's a lot of magic in those types of games as well. But the reason I prefer linear games is because, I don't know, maybe I'm at this point where I kind of like these crafted experiences. And I feel like a lot of the games that come out these days are open. And a lot of them don't even need to be open. They're just open for the sake of being open. So, I know I said I'm going to decide which one's better. But really, it's like picking between like Animal Crossing and Elden Ring. You know, when I'm in the mood for something very somber and just not paying much attention, not really engaging with the game that much, I'll play Animal Crossing, right? But when I want to, show what I'm about, show my gamer card out here, right? I gotta go for Elden Ring. It just depends on the mood. I can't really say which one's better, but I will say this. A lot of the games that are open these days, I grade them as an S tier. I know this is a really milquetoast opinion to have, right? It depends on your mood. But really, that's the answer I got. I can't pick between them because I love Breath of the Wild. Every time I hear the music that plays for opening a treasure chest, oh my god, I'm like taken back. I'm like, whoa, I'm back here. Then I play games like Uncharted and I'm like, wow, this is freaking amazing. Or God of War Ragnarok. I can't tell you which one's better because I like them both. Sometimes I like open more, but other times I like linear more. The only issue I see right now is that open world games have become the standard of realizing a fantasy. And a lot of the times, those fantasies are just an excuse to make an open world game, right? They don't even dive that deep into the fantasy. That's the whole reason they made a Star Wars Outlaws game, because they were trying to realize that Star Wars fantasy, this open world Star Wars game, it's an open world game, guys. You're going to be able to be a Star Wars person. You're not even a Jedi. What is the point of this? I have more examples for shitty open world games than shitty linear games. That's why I prefer linear games right now. But yeah, what do you guys think? Do you guys agree with me? Do you think linear games are better or open world? This is a pretty fun topic for me, so I'm hoping some people watch this and reply. I'm going to pop off on the thumbnail and the title.